Our guest is in the studio. He is Macharia Njeru. He is the former vice chairman of the Judicial Service Commission, and previously he had served as chairman of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. Macharia, were you the first chair of IPOA?
Yes, I was the first chair. Actually, I helped found IPOA. We were the ones who set it up.
Very good.
Right from the inception.
Very good.
That's right.
You are the right man to sit on the hot seat today.
Thank you.
You will explain to us. But before we do that, the day's proverb, City?
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Republic of Angola. What has been wet by rain cannot be wet by the fog.
What has been wet by rain cannot be wet by the fog. What's your interpretation of this, Wakili?
You know, my take on it is that what has happened or what ought to happen will still happen regardless, in the sense that you may try to, interpret things differently. You may try to change. You may try to, stop what really has to happen, or, as they say sometimes, you can't change the direction of a river. Once it has taken its course, it's taken its course. And no matter how much effort you may try to stop it, it's impossible to stop it. And in fact, I would relate it even with the current situation of Gen Zs.
Yeah.
When they are fighting for certain causes, when they are fighting for certain rights that they believe has been denied to them, when they think that the direction is not right, it's much easier just to relate to what they are racing, compromise and look at where did the rain start beating us, rather than fighting it, because no matter how much you try to fight it, it won't just stop. It won't fizzle away.
Understand it first.
Understand it. Identify with them, Understand the spirit and the mood of the nation at any given time. Align with it. And then when you're within it, just make things happen. Because at the end of the day, it's what the public wants, and you can't stop that. And I think that's where the failure of most of our leaders comes in. They want to relate with their personal feelings as opposed to the wishes and aspirations of the public.
And relate to personal feelings as opposed to what the public wants.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because when you're in leadership, actually, you're a trustee at whatever level. Sometimes the problem with our leaders is that they confuse the leadership as an entitlement or as a right, as a personal right. They forget that they do it in trust for the people. And you're only given that position for a time. Whichever leader you are, once that time comes, you leave.
Yeah.
You already called me a former chair of IPOA. I was a chair at one time, being called chairman. I am not. That's the reality of life. I was vice chair of JSC. For a time, I am not. So even a president, even an MP, even a cabinet secretary, we all serve for a time, and you leave, and others will come in.
Okay.
So it's all about understanding that you are there for a time, for a purpose, and your time to leave will come, whether you like it or not.
You will help us to understand a couple of things in our conversation today, hopefully. I want to start from the farthest, which is, you came from the private sector, you came into government, you served in a government institution, and then you went into another government institution. And people look at, people who are in government institutions, particularly in these commissions, and you're like, my God, it's like your life changes from, one side to the other side completely. And then you come back to where you started, and you have maybe to try and adjust with the new realities of after being called chairman and people pressing the lift for you and holding the door open for you and giving you a vehicle and all those things. You'll tell us about that. But I want to start on the rule of law and what we are seeing currently in the country. The day before yesterday, Monday night, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, it's a constitutional commission, reported to us that 39 people had died since these protests began. 361 had been injured. 627 had been arrested, and those that had been abducted or had just disappeared and not communicating with their family members, 32. And most of these are attributed to police. IPOA is the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. Let's start from, why is it called policing oversight and not police oversight?
Primarily because the role of IPOA as set under our constitutional dispensation was to ensure that there's oversight over all matters policing. Because remember, there are times that it's not just the police who are undertaking police duties. For instance, recently you saw KDF being brought in. There are times, and it's allowed within the law, especially during the elections, where even KWS, even Forest Service, they're also embedded with the police, to provide adequate resourcing on matters policing. That's why it's at that time, when they are given police powers, they become also police, which is why it's about oversighting policing to ensure that there are no human rights abuses. And the IPOA was meant to have adequate capacity to ensure that at any given time, even like, for instance, now during the demonstrations, and we used to do that when I was at IPOA, as the demonstration are being carried out, you're supposed to have inspectors who are accompanying police real time, and you're able to even take pictures, even videography, and ensure that you are seeing real time how the police are conducting themselves, that you're not firefighting looking for evidence later. So policing goes beyond being reactive, but also proactively ensuring that the processes and how police are supposed to conduct themselves and how they are supposed to carry out their duty is in strict compliance with the law.
Whose rights are you safeguarding, the public or the police?
It is the rights of the public, because at the end of the day, it's holding police to account. The whole idea about IPOA was to hold the police to account, understanding that you've given them very vast powers, which includes not only arresting, but also they could also take life. Remember, police are the people who have the monopoly of violence. They're the ones who are allowed to carry firearms, and they can always use them against the public. But they can't just use it in a reckless manner. It has to be in strict compliance with the law. And in fact, what you'll notice is that, and I must also state, Eric, that I am actually the one who led the team that drafted the current police laws. And the Schedule 6 that we drafted, that is very strict about how police are supposed to use their firearms, or even how they are supposed to arrest. And there are steps. If you look at that Schedule 6, there are clear steps. And these steps also include involvement of the superior officer, the commander, because police even when they're in the field, they have a commander. They have somebody, a specific officer who is supposed to be in charge of them, because police act on command and control at any given time. There's the issue of individual responsibility. In fact, the law is very clear that a police officer cannot obey a lawful order. And the commander or the superior officer at any given time is supposed to ensure that in the event there's the use even of discharge of a bullet, they are supposed to take custody of that evidence and inform IPOA immediately. Within 24 hours, even do it in writing, including indicating anybody who has been injured, and even provide medical assistance. And there are steps, like I said, before you even discharge that firearm.
Sorry. Can I just take you back just a little bit? So we're talking about discharging a firearm in whatever circumstance.
In whatever circumstances.
So whether it is going after a criminal that is known,
yes,
or whether it is like we saw during protests.
Absolutely.
If a firearm is discharged for whatever reason, the procedure is that you report the circumstances under which the firearm was discharged and every other detail. Is that
absolutely? And you see, these requirements are couched in mandatory terms. So it's not like there's a discretion of the police officer when to report and when not to report. And what is supposed to happen is that they're supposed to inform IPOA immediately by whatever means necessary. Then within 24 hours, follow it up in writing. It's a mandatory requirement. So to me, the question then that needs to be asked is why these steps are not being taken, and why IPOA itself is not enforcing it. Because failing to do that is an offense. It's an offense. And in fact, the way the laws were crafted was to make sure that this offense becomes an offense that is personal to the commander of the time, and even also the police officer. Because there was a realization that these regulations were necessary, the schedule was necessary, because of our history. The history had been very bad. But having said that, what I would also say is that my experience with the police is that it's largely dependent on the leadership at any given time. If you have a rogue police at the leadership level, it's always said that the tone will always be set from the top. It has a trickle-down effect.
Oh, yeah.
Then added to that is my experience that the politicians have completely refused to let the police be independent. They may say that the police are independent, but in actual fact, it is not what they say that really matters. A lot of times we say that, it's Ralph Waldo Emerson who said that your actions speak so loudly that I cannot hear what you are saying. So you'll find that politicians will say the police are independent, but behind the scenes, they are the ones who constantly interfere with them. And it's politicians at all levels. It's not just, at the very highest level. You find that even at the county level, whether it's the governors, whether it's the MPs, that's where you find that even people who are not police, they are being accompanied by police and they're issuing orders, they're even being saluted. The level of indiscipline is so high that the police are not left to do their work correctly. And you'll find that when there's that interference, even the crooked police, because they are being given protection by the political leadership at the time, they cease to become professional. So, yet our constitution is very clear that we have to have an independent police. So we have a constitution that is saying one thing, so there's constitutional imperatives, but there's no constitutionalism in terms of the application of that constitution. And therein lies the problem, and we have to be very consistent as a public in demanding that the police must be completely independent. Then we hold them to account.
Macharia, what would an independent police service look like? How would it operate for us to know, okay, here actually they are independent in word, in deed? How?
I would compare this, to answer your question, I'd look at London Metropolitan Police, because I recall that we studied extensively, even when I was in IPOA, the London Metropolitan Police. And we went back to the history. There's somebody called Sir Robert Peel who set up the London Metropolitan Police in 1829. And what they did is that they came up with core ideals. They had 3 core ideals and 9 principles. But all of them related to the issue of the public, policing with the consent of the public, where they were able to demonstrate that for you as police to succeed, you must get the consent of the public, because the public don't believe in you and they don't consent to being policed by you. It doesn't matter what you'll do. But again, for that to happen, the public must have confidence. They must see you to be independent, not just in word, but in how you conduct your affairs. They must be very clear that you are policing with the communities. So the relationship must be one that is of mutual respect, where they can see that you are there for them and not against them. So that speaks to exactly what you are saying, that for the public, it is not a question of the police saying that we are independent. The public must see it, because public is not stupid. They'll be able to see when you are being directed from elsewhere. They'll be able to see your conduct. They'll be able to see when you are for them and when you are against them. And you see, it is not correct to say that in Kenya, the public is against the police. It's not true. In fact, a lot of times you'll find that in spite of the numerous infractions by the police, the public largely will always side with the police, especially when the police are under attack. And even we saw in videos where you see police officers are fighting the public, even in demonstrations. I saw one video where a police officer fell from a truck. But you found the public running and going to help that police officer. Yet that police officer is from attacking the public. So public understand that they need the police for their own security. The problem is that a lot of times the police will not reciprocate. But I'll also tell you, because I'm one person who has interacted with the police a lot for a long time. I started interacting with the police from 2008 after the post-election violence, because I was part of the team that was in the National Task Force on Police Reforms. A lot of police officers are actually decent human beings. What happens, and this is something that we must deal with finality, is that you have these small units that keep being created that you do not know who they answer to, where they take their directions from, and a lot of time they are not part of the regular police. So even as the police are policing in the streets, even when they are dealing with the demonstrators, you will find some other fellows who are part of another unit who are from nowhere, who will come, shoot and leave, and you don't know who they are. Because you'll even see, and you see now, it's even bad now because, today, there's so much that is happening in the social media. People have phones. where they can take pictures. You have also, and you'll see people who are not even identifying themselves. And you see it's a requirement. It's a legal requirement that a police officer must have a name tag. It's a legal requirement.
Whether they are in civilian wear or
they
in
must
uniform.
have. It's a mandatory requirement. And again, the reason why that requirement was put was to avoid a situation whereby you have people whom you do not know who come and misbehave, where they live and take lives, or cause a serious injury on person. You can identify them. And in fact, the requirement that somebody must have a name tag is one that must be enforced by the superior officer at the time. Again,
are they practical, some of these things, though?
They are practical,
For example,
because it happens in other jurisdictions.
When police are conducting these very, serious operations, like, the anti-terror police unit, and you see them completely covered up, right? Because they are protecting themselves, because you know that if these terrorists know that you're the one who actually was involved in arresting so and so, they may target you individually as a person.
That's a different situation.
I see, like, that's what, but you're saying all police officers are supposed to be having a name tag at all times. But
no, I was referring to when there's picketing, demonstration, and that kind of thing. I was not referring to those kind of special operations.
Okay.
Because, this schedule is very specific, because remember this Article 37, which provides for the right to picket, a right to demonstrate, present, make presentations to public, authorities. So, right to picket, a police officer cannot claim that that's a special operation that you require to disguise yourself, because you are dealing with the members of the public, at that particular time. So, but you see, you've seen even in the recent occurrences where you're seeing people who are coming, you can't even differentiate between a goon and a police officer.
Fully covered up.
So, it simply doesn't make any sense. So, to me, it's a question of the refusal by the police also, and not all the police, by their leadership to be professional. I
want to hear whether in your time at IPOA, or even after, because you still interact with the news and you can see whether we have seen instances where IPOA has taken action on such, where police officers, like we've seen in those videos, people in, what color was that vehicle? The pickup?
Red.
And then they come out and they're completely covered and they are behaving like they're police officers. Some of them are carrying firearms. They come and they are involved in this operation and they leave. Are there instances where IPOA has actually followed up and taken action against the officers themselves and their superior?
At least in the IPOA that I served, such things never happened. We never even allowed it anyway. Because what we used to do is that during the demonstrations, we had set up a team that would also be embedded in terms of also carrying out the inspections. And we were very firm and very tough. Because we had even senior police officers, charged in court, jailed. In fact, we even had an OCS even sentenced to death for killing, a member of the public. So, have been taken aback also as a chair. And I think what I'll say is this, Eric. The first commissions and authority that were set up under the Constitution of 2010, they were fairly strong. I think we had come out, there was a lot of excitement and processes were used in terms even of how we, people were recruited and appointed and all that. And I think, and you recall that was soon after, it was during the tail end of Kibaki's leadership. And to be fair to President Kibaki, he allowed institutions to function. And there was a reasonable measure of independence. Because even the time when Kibaki was the president, I don't even recall any time, any interference at all from the leadership then with our work. And people were able to operate. And any person who served in the commissions then will tell you the same story, that things were allowed to function. And with that, there was the ability of personnel to do their work and discharge their obligations correctly. But this Huruto government, once they came in, I think to their mind, it was they were uncomfortable with independent institutions. And what they did is that as the terms of the various commissions came to an end, the kind of people who started now being populated within these commissions were failed politicians, were people, some of them even of dubious character, people who really had no sense of what constitutionalism is all about. And you'll see that a lot of commissions actually have.
So they've been watered down.
They've completely been watered down. Sometimes you don't even understand what they do. And to me, because I recall that even after we left IPOA, the new team, what they did, that they started even fighting with the secretariat, the management team. There were a lot of, it was in public domain, where there were a lot of fights, resources now being deployed, not in the core mandate of the institution, and things started going wrong. But I do not want to get into the details of that, because that's a story that seems to have, to have cut across against most of the constitution. But if we had stuck to the way these institutions were set up to ensure that the mandate is, implemented correctly without interference, and you have people of high caliber in terms even of credibility, would have been able to go very far. So, to answer your question, I see failure of the institutions in ensuring that there's professionalism, because the purpose for which these institutions were set up was primarily to ensure that we were to have a clean break with the past.
As we went to the break, you heard what Macharia was saying. He sounds like, he's saying these institutions are by and by getting weakened. And so they are not delivering on what is the ideal form of delivery.
He has had a front row seat in these matters. And he speaks of what he knows. But it raises as you were speaking, it raised certain questions in my mind. Loosely asked, how exactly do we as citizens perceive democracy to mean? I'm going to explain why I asked the question. Are we willing to take the position that democracy allows us to question authority, not defy, question, ask directly for answers from authority? Or do we understand democracy to mean that once somebody is in authority, our job is to obey, to acquiesce, to be in a position where we take instructions and simply accept that, as we say in Kiswahili, mkubwa amesema. Because when I look at the way we are compliant when it comes to things which are actually wrong, we find reason to accommodate it, then we find reason to justify it, then we find reason to live with it. Now, this younger generation are telling us they're not willing to do that. That is before they were clearly infiltrated. They were telling us they're not willing to do that. They are not putting up with it anymore. And that's why fingers were being pointed at their parents and saying it is you people who brought this about. As someone who's been in the position that you've been, do you really think that even when we create independent institutions, that those who head them understand that independence means you can talk to the authority above you and say, excuse me, these are the rules by which we are supposed to conduct our business? Or is our natural knee-jerk reaction to simply comply?
You raise a very critical issue that I resonate with, because in the institution that I've served, many at times I've actually been called a renegade, because I agree with you 100%. And for your information, I identify fully with the concerns of the Gen Zs, because for them, they've seen the abuse of power, they've seen the behavior on the part of the government institutions. And when I say government institutions, I mean all the three arms of government, because all of them are guilty. There's no, of course, executive and legislature, rank higher in terms of, misbehavior. But all the three arms of government must also share blame somewhat. Because, before I joined the government institutions, and I served in them for 16 years, but largely I was in private sector. I served in the banking sector, in the boards of banks, and I even chaired one in Rwanda, another in Uganda. But what I consistently noted in government institutions is that a lot of times the public interest is secondary. It becomes personal, private interest. And that's why you are, Eric, you are talking about where people get into government position, the first thing they think is that you should get a big car, should have bodyguards opening doors for you, you should be recognized, you should have, even when you are going through the airport, I see this strange behavior that you must have people carrying your bags, you must have somebody taking you through the immigration.
Yeah.
Yet in private sector, like in the banks where I served in the board, you find a CEO who is running a billion, enterprise. They carry their bag, they carry their passport.
Sure.
They'll be in the plane in an economy class, except where it's above 8 hours.
And
But
they arrive alive.
and they are doing serious business. In fact, they're bringing real value to the country, even in terms of the taxes that those institutions are remitting. But you find here a small person who is really a nobody becomes a commissioner, and now they think that they are everything. So it is the attitude of somebody who becomes, say, like a cabinet secretary. They all of a sudden become a god, or somebody who has just become a PS. So the attitude is so bad. And you see, I've interacted also heavily with people from other countries who are in senior government positions. In fact, I remember when I used to be in Nepal, I used to relate a lot with Robert Godek, the then ambassador. And you tell me that he doesn't understand the behavior of people who are in public service here. Because one, they don't keep time. Secondly, they believe that, that the sense of entitlement, they must have these big cars. Go to a country like Rwanda here, where people, even in senior positions, they drive themselves, Imagine. Let me tell you, even we must ask ourselves why we're even having these issues with our budgetary constraints. It's all about waste. If you ask me, there's so much, we don't even need to overtax people. If you just cut down on expenditure, and I'm speaking from personal experience as somebody who was related with government institutions for 16 years, where I saw a lot of waste real time. Like, what sense does it make to have so many vehicles, Prados and all that, If you go for a meeting like here in Naivasha and you see when government institutions are meeting, you go to a parking, you see all these brand new Prados, each costing 10, 15, 20 million shillings, with all these officers. Do we really need it for a poor country like ours? It doesn't make any sense. You see even the domestic travel, and a lot of it is unnecessary because a lot of work that people do in government institutions, that people will travel to Mombasa, spend a week there, go to Naivasha, go to Kisumu. The truth of the matter is, it's all about per diems and daily subsistence allowance. That's what they are looking for. It's not about that the work cannot be done in the boardroom.
It's the extra cash.
It's the extra cash. And that's why you'll find that most of them, what they'll do, if you are earning a salary of 100,000, you'll be surprised that when they put together the per diems and the DSCs, it comes to 1 million shillings a month. So why would that happen? I was in a bank for 8 years. There's no time I were ever in any retreat. And the bank was performing just well.
It didn't fall.
Yeah, it didn't fall. In fact, it performed.
That's why it was profitable.
Exactly.
Yeah, but these people, they just refuse to work from their boardrooms. They'll talk about training. They'll travel abroad for things that are called training. And when you look at the training they're traveling for, it's not that a training that cannot be done here. It can be done virtually. It can be done by institutions here. But again, it's about cash. Because the moment that person travels, you saw the other day about an official of county government in some ongoing case who was saying that even as he was traveling, he didn't even know why he was traveling, and he was paid per diem of 700,000. Commissions are even worse, I can tell you. You'll find that somebody is working and coming back with millions in their pocket with these per diems. It is annoying.
Just from one trip.
Yes, it's annoying because, see, people have no medicine in the hospitals.
Yeah.
People are suffering. And people here are busy competing on who will travel so that they can make money.
Macharia,
it is evil. And it's a problem, I can tell you, that is cut across all the three government institutions. I mean, all the three arms of government. All of them, they behave. Parliament even worse.
So let's look at a situation here, Macharia, because the thing that you're talking about now, because even as we start the conversation with police, then it is replete across, just like you have said.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I go back to the example that you gave about when a policeman or a woman, an officer, discharges a weapon and that there's a report that's supposed to be made. So it's a form of practice. There is a demand upon you to do a certain thing after an action. And that is what is in the system. But it's not done because it's not insisted upon from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Is there a case to be made for the notion that you cannot expect people to just do the right thing? You have to enforce it. It's like rote learning in school. I used to wonder, why on earth do these teachers insist that you're going to talk about the number 1 for the next 3 months for these 6-year-olds? And they say, we're going to go 1, 2, 3. We're going to go 1, 2, 3. Because if I leave you to your own wills, you will not. So I'm going to insist that we do 1, 2, 3 until it becomes a force of habit. Then you become habitual in doing the right thing. So is there a case to be made for the insistence on this practice across board? And then we see that it becomes second skin, it becomes second nature because it has been insisted upon from the beginning.
I agree with you. Save to add that the tone must be set from the top. You see, it has to start, for me, it's very easy to deal with this issue starting with the president himself, because ultimately he's the head of state. If you don't set that tone from the top, because see, the mistake that we all make at all given time is that we'll say one thing and do the other. For instance, like in our current situation, there must be clear directions from the head of state where we say that it cannot be business as usual. Because even as Gen Zs are complaining, they are complaining because of these habits that they've continued to see, where they are seeing all these bad manners and nobody is doing anything about it. For instance, can we start by saying that we are freezing international travel for everybody in all the institutions, all of them? Can we start by saying that we are freezing even the domestic travel? Because even this domestic travel themselves, except for security agencies, because those must travel. You can't tell a police officer not travel when they're doing investigations. The institutions like EACC, their core mandate is to investigate, the mass travel too. But there are most of these other institutions, they can do their work from the boardroom so that we can save all this money. Can we insist that we're not going to allow people to be buying all these vehicles? People can even self-drive. People are paid commuter allowance. Drive yourself. You don't have to have, all these vehicles that are costing us billions, billions of shillings. So this kind of profligacy, we cut it down, and it's possible to enforce it, but it must start from the top. Because you see, if you say that do this, but you're not, the rest of you do it, but you're not doing it yourself, therein lies a problem. Why I was talking about, for instance, I was giving you a case, an example of a parliament. I recall in the institution that I serve, they would tell you that if you are discussing your budget, we can't discuss it from Nairobi. You must make sure you discuss it from Mombasa. So that now, and when you are going to Mombasa to discuss it from there, they insist that you make sure that you also bring us per diem. They are being paid by their commission, and your institution must also pay them. So you can see this behavior. It is something that is cutting across, but it is something that is preventable. It can be stopped. Because these Gen Zs, the reason why they are complaining, they are seeing all these things. I just came from a business trip abroad last Saturday. And the taxi guy who was carrying me, he's a stranger to me. He complained from the airport up to the time when he dropped me home. And he was saying, we see these people coming here with the motorcades. They are misusing our resources. And we are suffering. We see them, So you can see people complain, and they are seeing these things. We should not take it casually. People complain. They know that they are suffering, and you are taking advantage of them.
Is it possible, Macharia, that even with the goodwill and the willingness of those in positions of leadership to do something, then you're also captive because of other factors? There's the politics, there's everything else. Because you see, you could say that as the chairman of IPOA, and you had a secretariat, and the head of the secretariat had the AIE, was the AIE holder. You could influence that person to say, let's not spend on these other extras. But there would be people who say, look, this is what is expected. This is what we have to do. So you ended up still spending money, despite the fact that you're looking at it and feeling, this is wrong.
But by the way, one thing I can tell you, Eric, and this is a matter that is known by all those who interacted with the IPOA that I led. We were very clear, like for instance, for us, even as the chair, I didn't have a vehicle. I was entitled to a vehicle, but we said we are not going to have a vehicle for our chair, we're not going to have a vehicle for the commissioners who are we said this time we are going to have vehicles in the pool that will be accessible to everybody, including our investigators. Because our core mandate was to investigate complaints. So that's where we deployed our resources. And so that's what I'm saying about setting the tone from the top. We are very clear. And even for us, even I as the chair, whenever I would be given transport, it is during the official working hours when I'm being dropped in a work-related issue, then dropped back to where my personal vehicle is, and I drive myself home. It is all about setting a culture in an institution.
Yeah.
And it is possible. There's nothing. I do not believe there's anything about being held captive. As a leader, you are determined to ensure the right thing is done. It will be done. And in fact, I remember during our time, we had never any qualified audited accounts through and through. In fact, the parliament kept understanding our work and our budget kept going up. By the time I left, we started with a budget of 150 million. By the time I left, we had a budget of a billion shillings because our work, we were doing the correct work that went to the core mandate. But now you see the problem is that if the people who are manning the institution, they have self-interest. They themselves, see what will usually happen is that the commissioners or the people who are responsible for running an institution, if they are rogue themselves, the secretariat will also take advantage because they'll say that let's all eat together. As you are budgeting for this, let's also budget together. You budget for your misbehavior, and they also budget for theirs. So the tone, I believe the tone must always be set from the top, and that also goes to the government itself, which is why I'm emphasizing that it is incumbent upon the head of state to set the tone from the top and say, this is what we'll do, but you must also do it yourself.
Macharia, is it possible that we are at a place where there are individuals we can argue do not know what is right, and so they cannot do it?
You see,
or their interpretation of what is right is
in any corporate setup, even and this is something that is normally applied a lot in the private sector. We are always told time and again that the success or failure of an institution will largely depend on the quality of the human capital within the institution. The quality matters because it is the people who do the doing. Never forget that. It doesn't matter what kind of policies you have. It doesn't matter what are the intentions. Ultimately, it boils down to the quality of the people. The reason why this show is successful is because of the quality of the people. Bring in people who have poor quality, the show will not pass the muster. So even in leadership, as a leader, if you do not have people of quality, people of integrity, people who are visionary, because remember, leadership is about being a visionary, it's about inspiring people, it's about attracting confidence of the people. I can tell you for a fact, and Eric, and I'm sure you know that you cannot rule by decree or by directing. It's a question of inspiring confidence, being able to carry people along with you so that they can believe in the cause. And then they'll be able to all work with you and do the doing. So, to me, it is incumbent upon the leaders at all levels, ensure you surround yourself with the right people. And the reason why you'll find that sometimes in our country things will go wrong, you look at the cabinet and you look at the people and you wonder whether they have any idea of what they are doing. People have no confidence in them. You'll communicate with the person and you'll see the person really has no idea. They cannot be able to have an idea. They cannot conceptualize what are the challenges, what is the strategic vision, how you are supposed to implement that strategy. They do not even have a large picture, the bigger picture. Because see, if you ask me today, even this finance bill, why do you have to get here? Surely anybody looking at that finance bill could see it's wrong. You can't have everybody complaining about the entire business community saying this thing is going to make our economy contract. People are saying that if you do this, it's going to cause a lot of socio-economic challenges. Surely, a cabinet is like a board of a corporate setup.
Yeah.
So if these people cannot be able to sit down and see through that, if you look at the larger picture, this thing is going to cause problems, then we have a bigger problem. We have a very big problem.
So if the tone is not set from the top in the things that we're looking at now, from the examples that you've given, just looking at things across the board, if the tone is not set from the top in the direction in which things ought to go, then the question remains, then what do you do? Do you wait until that term is over? Because again, this then hinges greatly on an individual and their character. So we're looking at a softer side. It's not the brick and mortar in terms of signing documents and giving edicts. It comes from a person's character and who this individual is. How do you force that tone to be set?
You see, at the end of the day, being a democracy, that's why you'll find that people will complain. And let's also be honest with ourselves that the pressure also, particularly from the Gen Z, it has worked to a large extent because the finance bill is not there. So the pressure has to continue, of course, within the rule of law.
Right.
Because again, you do not want a country that is falling into chaos, anarchy. It's not good for us. And we also have a government. We must also recognize that, and it's not something that you can run away. And it's also a government that was elected by the people. Again, we can't run away from that because even we ourselves are the people. We must question ourselves. How do we elect? But having said that, to me, the pressure has to continue. And in fact, we have to now, when it comes now to the next bill or looking at whatever it is, the bill that they bring, we must look at it critically. And members of parliament must also, and all those at the leadership level, must be able to recognize, in fact, the reason why they are being beaten up, and I'm not supporting that they be beaten up, but they must also ask themselves, why is it that people are losing respect for you? It's because you're not listening to them. Because it cannot be that you are being told something and members of the public are telling you that this is the public participation. It is not just a ticker box, kind of a situation. It's not being done for the sake of doing it. It's because you must listen to the people, understand what are their wishes, what are their aspirations, and obey it. I open my remarks by saying that these positions, we hold them in trust. All of us, at any given level. The moment you choose to be a public servant, you must remain a public servant answerable to the people that you work for. If you want to answer to yourself, go to private sector. Nobody will ask you about what to do with your business as long as, of course, you comply with the law.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's incumbent upon this discourse that we've started as a country, where we now say that as a people, we are not prepared to accept misbehavior, we'll hold it to account, must continue. I was being told by one of the guards this morning that they're happy that they are not seeing these fellows driving, on the roads and removing them with all these banderas and all that. It's a good thing because these people can see that if you continue misbehaving, we take, we don't take it kindly. So we are on the right track, I would say, as a country, and the pressure must continue, but within the law.
Asante sana. Macharia has been our guest. He is a former chairman, founding chairman of IPOA, and he was a former vice chairman of the Judicial Service Commission. Macharia and Njeru, have a lovely day.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.